Hi, my name is Sarah Whaling, and I'm a certified life and relationship coach. In my one on one coaching, I specialize in assisting reprogramming attachment styles, healing from narcissistic relationships, and healing the subconscious mind, which is the step past awareness in the healing process when lasting change is created for the life that we want. So, how can you recognize a fearful avoidant attachment style? This is part one in the fearful avoidant traits, 7 traits to look out for. Trait number one, the core wound, I cannot trust or I will be betrayed, is one of their biggest, if not biggest, core wounds. Unhealed fearful avoidance will almost always struggle with trust in relationships, especially once they are deeply attached to someone. They often handle the dating phase before a committed relationship fairly well without this getting activated. The only caveat to this is if the fearful avoidant has formed an attachment to the person they are dating and wants to be in a relationship with that person, but for whatever reason they aren't yet, such as the person they are dating being emotionally unavailable or perhaps dismissive avoidant, and they move slower than the fearful avoidant does. The fearful avoidant will not always be open about their trust wound, but it can show up as questioning, testing, or hypervigilance. Sometimes, if you break a fearful avoidance trust, it is game over for the relationship and they will exit the relationship pretty swiftly because this is an injury to the relationship along with an existing wound for the fearful avoidant. Fearful avoidants generally experience some type of trauma in childhood that formed the trust wound. Examples of this could be mental or emotional abuse, physical abuse, or sexual abuse. It could be that they had a parent with a personality disorder, where they grew up in an environment where they didn't know what to expect or could not trust that parent. For instance, with a narcissistic parent, the fearful avoidant may have experienced a plethora of different traumas on an ongoing basis, such as jealousy and sabotage from that parent, narcissistic rage, scapegoating, triangulation, or narcissistic poking, where the narcissist tries to invoke a reaction to gain supply. All of this will be especially true if they are the scapegoat. All of this fosters a sense of deep betrayal and mistrust for their own parent. Another scenario is that the fearful avoidant may have had a parent who struggled with addiction to substances. This created an environment where they never knew what to expect and simultaneously may have felt responsible. For instance, dad is passed out on the couch and the fearful avoidant feels like they need to get the dad to bed. The common theme is that there was a caretaker and or environment that they could not trust in childhood. Trait number 2, hypervigilance. As briefly mentioned in trait number 1, the fearful avoidance I cannot trust or I will be betrayed core wound often shows up as hypervigilance. It is often the case that when a fearful avoidant grows up, they don't form an attachment strategy. What does this mean? The fearful avoidant usually doesn't have the luxury of experiencing an environment in childhood that allows them to do this. This is the attachment style that generally experiences higher levels of trauma and a shaky or unpredictable environment or responses from a caregiver. This means that the only thing a fearful avoidant can do is recognize a change quickly and act accordingly. This is a skill formed generally pretty early in the fearful avoidance life and almost becomes a superpower. What is the best attachment strategy when you feel unsafe? Hypervigilance. The FA's attachment strategy is hypervigilance. What does this end up meaning? A fearful avoidant will almost always notice any changes in patterns of behavior or routine. They will notice microexpressions and body language. You won't be able to put much past a fearful avoidant. Hypervigilance is something that the fearful avoidant actually keeps after they heal and become securely attached. The only difference is that they won't have instances in which they automatically assign meaning based on their wounds to what they notice. Trait number 3, presence. This is one distinction between a dismissive avoidant and a fearful avoidant, though it will be somewhat nuanced since dismissive avoidant attachment style is on a spectrum and there are fearful avoidants who lean more dismissive. But generally speaking, you will get a great depth of presence from a fearful avoidant. One of a fearful avoidant's needs in relationships is depth of connection. Even a more dismissive leaning fearful avoidant will still have a need for depth of connection. They will just fill their smaller cup for that faster, but it is a cup that definitely exists and it is an important need for every fearful avoidant. Some fearful avoidants can grow frustrated, bored, or have wounds activated if the connection only scratches the surface, but we often do not grow up learning about boundaries and needs. So, this is a great example of what can happen when one, we do not know what our needs even are, and two, we do not communicate them. For example, a fearful avoidant can feel rejected or disrespected if they feel like they are investing and only getting surface level communication from someone, instead of recognizing that depth of connection is a relationship need that they have and then actioning it by communicating about it. Fearful avoidants often want to have conversations about someone's hopes, dreams, life experiences. They will often, in some form, lean towards conversations that are people oriented, whereas dismissive avoidants will often have the conversation preference of things, politics, news, events, and activities. Trait number 4. Fearful avoidants usually fall into one of two categories. They are usually either overachievers or they are really doing poorly. Now, this is not all, but this is a big number of FAs. When they fall into the category of overachievers, they are generally very, very focused on whatever aspect of their life that represents success to them. If that is health or fitness, they will really throw themselves into their wellness routine and have no problem maintaining regular workouts, for example. They will really make health a regular theme in their life regarding different daily aspects, such as their diet and sleep, and this will really be a priority for them. And they can get really upset if something gets in the way of this because health would really be a personality need for them. Another example is they might have a career dream and they will really throw themselves into doing whatever it takes to make things happen. This type of FA can really be a workaholic. Another example is that they could really be into home projects and become really focused and just really throw themselves into the project and devote hours of their time to getting it done, and sometimes be kind of a perfectionist about it. The overachiever fearful avoidant is accustomed to the idea that if they want to make something happen in their life, they will, and they have learned this through experience. So these are some examples of the overachiever category. If the fearful avoidant falls into the second category and they are doing poorly, then they are generally really struggling. This will reflect often in chaotic relationships, and they might have substance abuse issues and various types of addictions. Fearful avoidants can commonly be kind of intense people. It is interesting to note that these categories are two extremes, and different extremes is a common theme with fearful avoidant attachment style. Which brings me to the next trait. Trait number 5. They often can have extreme trauma responses. When the fearful avoidant deactivates, they often deactivate extremely strongly. They generally deactivate all at once over a trigger and then recover faster than a dismissive avoidant. The way in which they deactivate is one difference between the fearful avoidant and the dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidance will not deactivate to such a strong degree. It will be to a lesser, more pervasive degree. Dismissive avoidants are usually in a perpetual slight deactivation on a regular basis, whereas fearful avoidants most often swing from deactivation to activation and back again, really depending greatly on what wounds are activated at the time. This represents their hot and cold pattern in relationships. When the fearful avoidant shuts down, they really shut down. Another way the extreme trauma responses can show up is the fight response, which brings me to the next trait. Trait number 6, volatility. If the fearful avoidant has one of their wounds triggered by a partner, for instance, they can get really loud angry and very harsh with their words. It is not unusual for a fearful avoidant to say a lot of things that they don't mean during conflict and feel very guilty about it later on, or sometimes expect a partner to understand that they were angry in the moment and their words shouldn't have a lot of weight to them. This is obviously not the healthiest way of dealing with things, but this is a pretty big pattern that you could see in fearful avoidant attachment. One reason behind the volatility is that fearful avoidants generally have many more triggers than other attachment styles. You can think about it as mines in a minefield. There's going to be the potential for a lot more volatility if you have a lot of mines that people in your life can step on in your minefield. Trait number 7. Some common emotions that an unhealed fearful avoidant experiences on a regular basis are anger and hurt. These two are what can lead to the volatility often seen in conflict. Often frustration when they feel trapped, overwhelmed, pressured, anxious or panicked, guilty, ashamed, and offended. When a fearful avoidant starts to heal, they will notice that these negative emotions in their patterning show up less and less often and are less and less intense as the healing process progresses. Well, I hope this has been informative when it comes to recognizing some common traits of a fearful avoidant if you suspect that a loved one or possibly you could be a fearful avoidant. Stay tuned for part 2 of Traits of a Fearful Avoidant coming soon. And if you'd like to check out my one-on-one coaching, please visit my website. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, it would really mean a lot if you gave it a thumbs up, and if you find this place helpful, I invite you to subscribe and hit the bell to join me for more future content.